We are uncovering the buried secrets and untold stories as the hidden chapters of the Vietnam War come to light, exposing a shocking reality that has remained concealed for far too long. Get ready to dive into some jaw-dropping revelations about the Vietnam War that Uncle Sam didn't want you to know. We're about to spill the beans on the hidden truths and untold stories kept under wraps for decades. Let's start. From 1965 to 1973, the United States was embroiled in a grueling war against the communist forces of North Vietnam. This brutal conflict unfolded as a harrowing guerrilla war, pushing young American soldiers far from their homes to face an unconventional enemy. The Vietnam War's legacy remains contentious, with some viewing it as a justified defense of South Vietnam against Northern communist aggression. In contrast, others argue it was an unjustified war rooted in U.S. imperialism and Cold War anti-communist fears. One undeniable fact is that the war claimed the lives of millions, with a significant number being innocent civilians who fell victim to American actions. Amid the many tragic civilian deaths caused by the U.S. military, one incident stands out in infamy: the My Lai massacre on 16th of March 1968. During this horrifying event, 504 innocent civilians, including women and children, lost their lives in an unimaginable atrocity that continues to haunt the collective memory of the Vietnam War. In 1968, the Vietnam War had taken a grim turn for the Americans. North Vietnam launched the Tet Offensive in January, which strained its military might and shattered U.S. morale at home and abroad. Desperate to regain the initiative, the U.S. initiated a series of counter-offensives, one of which targeted Quang Ngai Province, specifically the village of My Lai, or Pinkville as the Americans called it, due to its perceived communist sympathies. My Lai was believed to be a hotbed for Viet Cong activity, and U.S. intelligence claimed it was a communist outpost. In March 1968, Task Force Barker was assembled to deal with the situation. The task force included soldiers from Company C of the 1st Battalion, 20th Infantry Regiment, and Company B of the 3rd Battalion, 11th Brigade, and 23rd Infantry Division, which we'll refer to as B Company and C Company respectively. C Company, under the command of Captain Ernest Medina and his second-in-command Lieutenant William Kelly, had entered Vietnam in December 1967. Despite not having seen direct combat, they had already lost 28 men to booby traps and landmines by March 1968. The soldiers in C Company were deeply affected by the loss of a beloved sergeant, and their anger and frustration had soon led to a tragic event known as the My Lai Massacre. In the dim evening light, Task Force Barker gathered, aware that their mission would begin at dawn. Their orders were clear. They would launch an attack on the village of My Lai. C Company was to enter the village, while B Company secured a nearby hamlet. A Company's task was to watch the fleeing VC outside the village. Captain Medina, their commanding officer, ominously warned C Company of heavy communist resistance, leaving them outnumbered 2-1. He instructed his men that anyone who remained after the civilian population left for the market at 7 a.m. the following day would be considered an enemy. The briefing was shrouded in uncertainty. Some soldiers claimed they were instructed to kill any combatants or suspected combatants, including women and children. Medina's words varied among accounts, but the message was clear: anyone running, hiding, or appearing as an enemy was a target. In Vietnam, body counts were the measure of a combat unit's effectiveness, encouraging the inclusion of civilians among the enemy dead. Regardless of the official orders, the soldiers understood the grim reality: leave nothing standing, whether it be a combatant or civilian. On March 16th at 7:24 a.m., the tranquility of the Vietnamese countryside was shattered by artillery. Shells rained down from a shocked and unsuspecting civilian population between 7:30 and 7:37. C Company, inserted by helicopter into the hamlet of My Lai, engaged 4 suspected combatants outside the village but encountered no more throughout the day. Intelligence had failed, as no fighters were present and only 1 weapon was recovered. Despite the villagers' caution, they welcomed the American GIs. The civilians were rounded up and assembled in joint spaces. It seemed they did not suspect anything amiss. However, without warning, a U.S. soldier stabbed a civilian with a bayonet, triggering a gruesome massacre. Gunfire erupted, and the Americans showed no mercy. They tossed grenades into bunkers, shot anyone they encountered, and used grenade launchers on groups of civilians to make killing more efficient. B Company, arriving later, committed a similar massacre in a nearby hamlet, killing between 60 to 155 people. U.S. Army photographer Sergeant Ronald Haberly documented the horrific events after playing a crucial role in exposing the massacre. The My Lai massacre stands as a dark chapter in the Vietnam War, a stark reminder of the brutality of war. Years later, the chilling events of that fateful day still haunted the memories of those who bore witness. The photographer vividly captured the fear-stricken faces of civilians, bound and helpless. Moments later, the execution commenced, and the aftermath revealed the lifeless bodies of women and children. Among the chaos, an injured boy stumbled through the scene, only to be ruthlessly shot by an American soldier. Lieutenant William Kelly, the company's second-in-command, was suspected of issuing orders to kill civilians. Kelly, too, orchestrated the execution of 70 to 80 civilians. In one heart-wrenching episode, a woman, having witnessed her children being shot, suffered a brutal fate. The massacre lasted for hours, with some soldiers like Specialist Bernardo Simpson personally engaging in horrific acts, resulting in at least 20 women and girls losing their lives. While a few refused to partake, no one raised a voice against the carnage. Only a single shot was fired at an American soldier, by one who aimed for his foot as an excuse to escape the scene. It remained a stark divide, viewed as an attempt to avoid war crimes by some and as a cowardly act by others who chose self-preservation over stopping the bloodshed. In a harrowing account, 3 soldiers, including Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson Jr., Specialist Lawrence Colburn, and Specialist Glenn Andrietta, displayed tremendous bravery and humanity during a distressing operation. Witnessing the horrifying execution of an injured woman by Captain Medina, they attempted to intervene and save civilians. The helicopter crew's desperate calls for help went unanswered, prompting them to take matters into their own hands. They courageously evacuated about a dozen civilians, even as they faced the possibility of having to use force to protect them. The tragic incident resulted in varying estimates of casualties, predominantly women, children, and older people, with minimal combatants among the victims. In the face of overwhelming odds and a dire moral dilemma, Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson Jr., Specialist Lawrence Colburn, and Specialist Glenn Andrietta showcased remarkable courage and compassion. Their actions serve as a testament to the innate goodness within humanity, even amidst the horrors of war. Their unwavering commitment to preserving innocent lives despite significant personal risk exemplifies the highest ideals of military service. When Thompson and his crew returned to their base, they promptly reported a mass murder they had witnessed. Thompson informed his captain that they were rounding up and mistreating individuals in ditches before fatally shooting them. The reports were escalated through the chain of command, eventually reaching Colonel Orrin Henderson. Henderson interviewed Thompson, but any hopes for justice was shattered when the official statement from Task Force Barker stated they had killed 128 Viet Cong VC with no mention of civilian casualties. Despite interviewing Thompson, Henderson recommended Captain Medina for promotion 2 weeks after the massacre. General William Westmoreland, the head of MACV, sent a congratulatory message to C Company, and military newspapers celebrated the company's supposed victory over a VC village. However, some doubted the story. A military investigation initially claimed that 20 civilians had been inadvertently killed, primarily due to an artillery barrage. Meanwhile, the soldiers of C Company boasted about executing hundreds of civilians. Specialist Ron Ridenour, who caught wind of this, saw dishes filled with civilian bodies and reported the truth. Months later, Tom Glenn wrote a letter describing a pattern of violence against civilians in Vietnam, indirectly alluding to My Lai. Colin Powell investigated the claims but concluded they were exaggerated. The military's attempt to cover up the massacre were increasingly evident. Rob Rittenauer joined others in calling for an investigation, writing numerous letters to President Nixon, the Pentagon, and over 30 Congress members. Finally, in September 1969, the military quietly charged individuals involved in the My Lai massacre. In 1969, Seymour Hersh, a journalist, exposed a shocking incident of 6 counts of murder, the infamous My Lai massacre. Hersh's article unveiled the massacre's brutality and the military's attempt to cover it up. Photographs taken by Sergeant Haberly revealed U.S. soldiers killing hundreds of Vietnamese civilians. National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger led the Nixon administration, failed to contain the story, significantly eroding public confidence in the war. Some still believe the allegations were false and aimed at demonizing the troops. A proper investigation was launched, led by Lieutenant General William Pierce, who reported that at least 200 civilians had been killed. Charges were filed against 26 soldiers, including Lieutenant William Kelly, but only a tiny fraction faced trial. Kelly was the sole person convicted of the massacre, sentenced to life in prison. Reactions were mixed, with some believing Kelly's actions were justified. President Nixon intervened, changing Kelly's sentence to house arrest and eventually granting him a full pardon in 1974. The heroic actions of soldiers Thompson, Colburn, and Andreotta, who tried to stop the massacre, initially went unnoticed. They were eventually awarded the Soldier's Medal, the Army's highest non-combat honor, in 1998. However, the events at My Lai left lasting scars, particularly severe PTSD for Thompson. My Lai was a significant event during the Vietnam War, revealing the capacity for U.S. atrocities, raising questions about soldiers' attitudes, and leading to disturbing accounts. It cast doubt on the narrative of the war and prompted concerns about undisclosed occurrences during that time. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe, hit the bell icon, like, and share our videos for more awesome content.